Hi, and welcome to another episode of Cybeers. I'm lucky enough today to be joined by Jack Rutherford, Chief Technology Officer. Welcome.
Hello.
You've been filling in for me for a little while I've been off traipsing around the world. How have you found hosting Cybeers?
Yes, I took over a bit.
Took over is the right word.
That's
Absolutely.
Right, that's right.
I saw all of a sudden Cybeers pop up on our LinkedIn and went, oh, that's a bit new. I don't remember recording that one. Oh, wait, no, that's Jack.
I like to think of it as initiative.
Initiative.
Absolutely.
Took
the reins.
Took the reins.
It was good fun, but I learned that your job's a bit harder than it looks over there behind the mic as the host.
Like to try and make it look easy.
That's right.
And first time joiner, we've got Mike Higo, Head of Penetration Testing.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome, mate, for Cybeers. So we've gone nice and hard on the beers today, gentlemen. We've gotten the Heaps Normal 0% alcohol quiet XPA.
Can't go wrong.
Jack, I know you're a big fan of these, and you've gotten me stuck into them for the time you want a beer without having a beer.
Absolutely. And I've actually gone deep into the non-alcoholic beer realm recently. There's a lot out there, but this is certainly one of the top ones, the classic, and the one that most people know about, I'd say.
I didn't realise you'd gone so heavy into the zero alcohol. So I know you're getting back into your fitness pretty heavy. Didn't realise you'd gone down that rabbit hole. But that's like you, data-driven decisions.
That's right. Yep. A lot of well-known or lesser-known names out there, I think.
Yeah,
in the non-alcoholic
Heineken
beer
0.0s. I had Heineken recently in Amsterdam. It actually tastes really good in Amsterdam. So who would have thought?
Yeah, they're not too bad. Some of the recent ones, Bridge Road, it's a good non-alcoholic one.
Bridge
and
Road's a great brewery.
Tiny non-alcoholic
I'm
beers
trying
too.
to get Jack to go full hipster and try and get him on the hop water.
Oh my lord, have you heard about the hop water?
Did you say hot water or hot water?
Hop water.
What's hot water?
You just take your sparkling water and you put some hops in there, let it sit for a while, and you get a nice hoppy water, nice fresh beer sort of taste, 0 calories, fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh man, it is called
hipster
Cybeers, and we are here to learn a bit about beers as well. But that one's just taking the cake there
It's
a little
just
bit.
beer flavoured water.
Yeah, I'm just going to take the
Most
opportunity.
people will
to-
say that this is just
Cheers.
beer flavoured water.
I'm just going to crack this one.
Cheers to beer flavoured water.
Cheers to beer flavoured water.
Pretty good.
I used to really take it out of you when you were drinking non-alcoholic beers. And I'd say, you might remember, I'd say, well, what's the point? But you've got me into them lately as well when I'm back into my fitness. And I've got to say, there's a reason they're the well-known ones.
They've
Yep.
come a long way.
They have come a long way, yeah. The ones that taste good, taste good. You just got to avoid the ones that taste like water.
I don't, it tastes like hot
Or
water.
hot water, whatever.
You got to avoid them unless it's on purpose, by choice, then it's fine.
Yes.
I don't know if I could have, I could never have more than one Heaps Normal though. Like-
Yeah. You get sick of them after a few, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Anyway, we're not here just to talk about beers, guys. We're here to talk about offensive security services, otherwise known as penetration testing. So, Jack, you started the penetration testing practice almost at TL 8-9 years ago. Well, not necessarily started, but we're heavily involved in the formation and the continuation of the process. How's things changed in the last 8 years since that time period?
Wow, what a question. How have things changed? I mean, 8 years ago, just a couple of people, very much web app focused, very much looking at just the most obvious things for clients who are running very simple web apps, I would say, right? Not a huge amount of functionality, not a whole lot of the modern cloud stuff that you see today, not a whole lot of the dynamics, the dynamic web pages that you kind of see. Since then, yeah, we've branched out into all the different pen testing areas, I would say. We've got all the internal, external web app, cloud, the whole lot. And then you can talk about red teaming and more that we'll talk about today. But it's been a few years now, so I'm certainly not a leading expert on the topic. And hence we've got Mike, who the reins have been handed to.
So, Mike, you've been in the industry for a fair while as well.
So about 9 years now.
5 years?
9?
9.
9
I was going to
years,
say
yeah.
5's a bit short. How have you seen the industry change? We've only been at TL for 4 months now.
So I'm about 4 months at TL. I think the most interesting thing that I'm finding is that the industry is changing, but it's also quite cyclical in nature. We were seeing people following trends, moving up towards the cloud, moving into the hybrid environments, moving into having things hosted by third parties. We've sort of seen that come full circle again now. People feeling like all the downsides of those are there. We got to go back to on-prem.
Everything that's new again is old.
Everything that's new is old again. That's always the way it goes. But I do think that there's a big shift in where responsibilities lie right now based on who's hosting what, based on where things are hosted. And I think that's one of the main focuses that we have to be wary of today. Where does the buck stop in pen testing? And where does the scope creep come in that we'd like to talk about?
Oh, I was going to mention that magical word that is scope. And
had to do it.
Threat actors just don't care about scope. We hear on a lot of Cybeers episodes from Richard Granger, head of digital forensics, and how threat actors get into organisations and pivot, and how they're able to move laterally and then launch ransomware. And do you think we're testing enough for that kind of threat and that kind of breach through the offensive security side, or we're not quite there with testing the whole methodology from end to end? Can I be hacked?
I don't think we're there yet. I think that there is a move right now, which I'm very happy with, away from this idea of pen testing as a compliance check. Pen testing to get something done for the sake of it. Because initially the companies who were doing pen testing really wanted the pen testing. And you could see that they were passionate about the results. Then when pen testing became more corporate, we noticed that there was this move towards companies going, oh, I need to do this for compliance. And now we're moving back into we're realizing that this is an actual genuine boon. We need to have this done. Let's do some proper pen testing again. And let's have some ongoing relationships with our security provider, whether it be normally in the defensive side. Now we're seeing a lot more of the offensive side of relationships being built, ongoing testing. And we could do broader testing. Once you've established that relationship with the client, you can be more comfortable in their networks. They're more comfortable knowing that the results that you're putting out are good results, and you can go out there and do more broad spectrum testing.
Is there a risk of doing that whole end-to-end broad spectrum? What could a threat actor do if they were to gain access? I'd look back in the day and you'd run a scan, and there was some systems that were so sensitive that the client would say, hey, you can't touch that, that's out of scope, and that's the reason they'd get it out. Is there still that level of risk, or have we transcended past that?
I think there is going to be an inherent level of risk at any time. I mean, we always say the magic words, denial of service is out of scope. We're always going to look after
Ransomwaring a box is also out of scope.
It's out of scope.
Purposeful denial of service is out of scope.
I think that the risk of those sort of things is heavily mitigated these days with things running in online elastic clusters. You're not going to denial of service your Microsoft Graph backend API. And that's going to be one of your primary points of lateral movement these days and post-exploitation. I don't think there's as much of a risk as there once was, but that risk is never going to be zero. You need to weigh up as a company, is there a greater risk for me letting my pen tester do this, or is there a greater risk for me not doing this? And I think it's always going to be a greater risk to not do this.
Yeah, threat actors don't care about scope.
They don't care about the scope.
So it sounds like we're talking more about the red team, purple team, this team. I think as an industry, we've gone too much towards wanting to define what a test is through actual giving it a name, rather than just, can we end up on the front page of the media because we've been ransomware tested? Can we just start calling it that?
Yeah, the holistic testing, for lack of a better word, everybody loves it, it's hot right now. But realistically, is my entire environment clean? And
the answer is always no.
Answer is always no, but rather we find it. It's the age-old thing. Rather we find it than somebody else. And I think we're going into an area here where nothing is clearly defined anymore. Because I was saying to you earlier today, I don't know when the last time I was doing an internal and it was purely internal. I have never really, in the last 3 or 4 years, done an internal where everything's purely on-site or on-prem. It's always going to be cloud. In fact, these days it's predominantly hybrid with majority cloud. So you're doing a very small on-prem portion, and then you're looking to pivot as soon as possible. And once you've pivoted upwards, once you've pivoted from an SOE onto a cloud environment and you're abusing these tokens and that inbuilt trust relationship, keys to the kingdom, really. Because people are hoping that you're not going to get there, but once you're through, you're through. And that's where the real problems arise.
Hope is not a strategy, as 100%. We always say, right? And this
Defense
is where CPS 234 brought in the concept of controls testing and actually verifying the controls you've got in place are working as should be intended. And 234 was released 6 years ago. So APRA had the foresight to put in there test the controls. Now, we all know that there have been some APRA-regulated entities that have been compromised. Not going to mention names, that we've covered it to no end. But when even APRA sees this, when, Jack, do the corporates and the SMEs catch up and realise they need to do this type of testing, not just do my web app testing once a year and she's right?
Yeah, really good question. Because it requires such a huge mindset shift, right? You've got all these people in those organizations that have been doing their annual pen testing for 10, 15 years.
Because
right?
it tells me on some compliance check sheet, which there's a place
Yep.
for it.
Yep. And so they are just in the habit, they're used to doing it. And, the next year comes around and suddenly they get told we have to do this completely differently. Hard for them to do, right? They have existing plans in place. They have a budget that they've described to their management that they're going to need for this activity to happen the way that they expect, right? So it's quite a big shift, especially for those organizations who've been doing it for a long time. But it needs to happen. And maybe it starts in the boardroom. Maybe it starts by, the professionals telling the leaders of these organizations, hey, we have to think about security a bit differently now, right? Who cares about a bit of a compliance check? Let's look at, like Mike says, holistically, where are the problems? Where are the holes in the perimeter? What are the threat actors actually doing? Not just what are the pen testers doing, really.
Look, and you've just hit one of my other main pain points that you're both very aware of, and that is that security is still not being represented at the board level the way that it should be. I've talked about this a lot the last couple of weeks internally at TEL. I still believe that cyber should not report to IT. It's a massive conflict that we've got as an industry, and I'm a believer that cyber should report into risk. And ideally, if you have a CISO, they should be sitting on the board at an executive level and reporting directly into either the chief risk officer, but my ideal is into the CEO. You're going to remove that conflict. And I think until you get cyber represented, you're absolutely right, Jack, at the board level, talking the right things and saying, hey, this is actually the testing we need to do. Not just an annual tick box of my web app because my compliance says so, but actually we need to test to make sure the controls are in place, but then provide the actual results to the board to make informed risk-based decisions of this is why we need to spend money, because our team was able to find an account that didn't have MFA on the VPN, find some creds in SharePoint, use those creds, then RDP to a domain controller, dump all the hashes, crack the passwords, and then launch some ransomware. That's really what we're trying to do at the end of the day.
And the other part of that comes to mind about that mindset shift for how we do this type of testing, one that I know, Mike, you're quite passionate about, is at the moment, pen testing is a very annual thing. You do it once a year, it's point in time, you finish it in a specific time frame, and then you give one report, and that's that. Whereas in reality, IT environments these days are changing every day, right? It's almost like the pen testing results are invalidated within a week.
I don't like sending out a report that says, here's your limitations, and it was a time-boxed assessment or it was caveated. I don't like that because it just feels a little bit like a scapegoat, and we don't want to just provide you with the assurance that it was okay now. I want you to provide you with the assurance that it's okay ongoing, and that's where I'd like to be going.
Yeah, so Mike, what shifts are you seeing from a pen testing provider point of view for how we can tackle that problem?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot less interest in the traditional once-off pen tests. I'm seeing a lot less interest in a big report, because a big report often means a lot of admin. And that is one of the bigger downsides that we've seen with the traditional quick check pen testing. It takes time to onboard you. It takes time to get all the permissions. It takes time, as you were saying, to go to the board and get all of the prerequisites sorted. Then the testing gets done. We run into some issues. Maybe it's already a tight time frame. At the end of that, we have to write the report. We generate the report. We send it out. And then they've got to read and remediate this. And then they think, okay, it's done. We're safe until next year. It's not the case anymore. I think the case these days is pen testing as a service. Big buzzword, as a service, always has been for the last 5 years. But
walked around Black Hat 4 years ago and all you saw was offensive security as a service. Now you go and you see no vendors doing it because the communities didn't take it and organizations just didn't understand why it's such a requirement.
And now they're understanding it. I'm seeing a shift. As I was saying, once we build these relationships with the clients and they understand that we have their best interest in mind and it's not a quick compliance check, let's do the as a service thing. Specifically, we're seeing it more with raid team environments. A traditional raid team of 2 weeks. 2 weeks is great. It sounds like a long time for testing. We can get a lot done, and we really can. But I'm going to get a lot more done if we do 3 or 4 days once a month for 6 months. At the end of those 6 months, it's given me time in between to step back and reassess everything. It's given me time to put these things together, do phishing, do cradling, do low and slow, do bypasses. At the end of that, we give out one big report. If there's anything overly critical where the public would be able to find this as easily as we did, immediately, here's your quick high vulnerability report.
Here you go. I am sitting here laughing my head off and you're looking at me sideways like, Nick, why are you laughing? It's because when Jack was the head of penetration
I think
testing,
you might be laughing at me.
I believe 6 years ago, I suggested that this would probably be a good way to look at pen testing, and you vehemently fought it.
I may have pushed back a little bit on that one.
It's probably one of the things you fought me hardest on ever. But do you think it's because the industry wasn't ready at the time, but it was also a mindset shift for the pen testers themselves and people who actually have to perform the tests?
Well, looking back, it's actually a really good reflection.
You're allowed to say, Nick, you were right. It's fine.
No. I would never.
You're also allowed to say, I was wrong. It's fine.
I was wrong. Let's get it on record. Let's get it on the camera.
It's on camera.
It's forever etched in YouTube
Inside his
history.
law.
No, but it's an interesting reflection on myself now, right? Because I'm talking about the mindset shift that's required from the people who are purchasing pen tests. But you're absolutely right. There was a mindset shift required for myself, for those who are providing the pen tests. You don't just have the people buying the pen tests who are used to this annualized recurring thing. You have the people delivering the pen tests who are used to exactly the same model. And they're not just going through it once a year, they're doing it every day under this model. So that requires them to have a shift on how they think about pen testing, right? It's easy as a pen tester to just want to go for the
Get
cool,
my
the
scope,
cool
get my
vulnerabilities.
Oh, the cool
right?
vulnerabilities.
A lot of pen testers have that I'm an adversary mindset, but not an adversary as in I'm malicious, as in I want to see what I can cause to find. And it does. It's the cool factor. It's the wow factor. I've done this. I've got DA. I found this really cool thing. Amazing. It's bragging rights.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
but
your
does-
client doesn't care about your bragging rights. They really just want to be assured
And
at the end of
bottom
the
line
day.
is nor is that typically what we're seeing, the way that the real life threat actors are actually getting into networks and causing
Absolutely
havoc.
not.
Yeah, it's often the low hanging fruits, the things that aren't glamorous. That's what they're going after, because it's a nice, quiet, and simple way in.
And I think we're starting to see that change in offensive personnel as well. We grew up in the era that we're in cyber because we genuinely love it. We're passionate about it, and maybe gate kept it. Maybe.
Maybe.
Cyber is quite gatekeepy.
Who might have done that? I don't know. Anyway.
That's a community. We never did it. We support everyone. Well, we do, but there are some that probably gate kept. Jack, I'm not saying you did, but I'm just saying there are some that might have gate kept a little bit too long. You look at Black Hat, you look at DEF CON. They are intimidating conferences to go to.
Exceedingly so.
Unless you're a hardcore in the industry, and you look at the presentations that get accepted, and I remember there was one about someone hacking a Starlink because he managed to take the Starlink apart and get a board from a multifunction printer that he then
That one was
soldered
wild.
in and then reprogrammed. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool.
Is it practical?
Really cares? Like, is that like something we should care about as an organisation? Practical.
This is not a broad spectrum issue. This
No,
is
so-
not going to affect 99% of
So-
companies in the world.
Where I'm getting to is now we're bringing new people into the industry that it's become a bit more corporatized as
Very
cybersecurity
much.
professionals. They don't have that mindset from 2003 where we were doing it because it was cool and we'd get bragging rights. They're now looking at it going, I have a job to do, and that is to find if there's gaps and holes in this network. So I think the new people coming to the industry makes it so we can have a bit more of that mindset shift as well.
Definitely do. There's much more of a corporate mindset right now. Sometimes I find it can sway too far in the other direction. You do still want your pen testers to have that
Cool factor.
drive, the cool factor, because it is a terrific job. It is super interesting. The problem is it became saturated, and in order to break in, you needed to be standing out. And the way that you could stand out was by becoming another typical corporate figure within it. And that would help you blend in, and that would help you get into potentially one of the big fours, for example. But you do still need that initial drive, that initial wow factor, the love for doing what we do. And yeah, I don't want that to be lacking. I don't want it to become too corporate. I say that as somebody who deals with the corporate side, but you don't want it to become too corporate, because then you're going to lose the people who are there that aren't interested in the corporate side.
Yeah. Look, you still have to be passionate about cyber.
You do.
You still have to love what we do, because it is a thankless job. Nobody should ever be calling us to say thank you. If we're calling you, it's probably something wrong. We're the bringers of doom. So you have to love what you do and be passionate, because you feed that off each other. Jack, we had, as a community, something that was raised a number of years ago, and that's called CORIE.
Yes.
Now, CORIE was a
Very
big
cool.
topic for a long time, that the banking sector was going to have to do this objective-based testing. It was going to be based on cyber threat intelligence. We were informing all of our ADIs and regulated entities that it was coming. They were going to have to do it. It was tested within a couple of the big four. It's big in the UK. Then all of a sudden, COVID came along and CORIE's disappeared. So that's very similar to what we're talking about now, is that controls-based objective testing. What happened with CORIE?
So firstly, Mike, do you know about CORIE?
I don't.
So I
There you
believe, I think I've got the acronym. Cyber Operational Resilience and Intelligence Exercise? Something along those lines.
Objective-based
Objective
testing.
based, goal based.
Yeah,
Yeah.
intelligence-led, I think, was the other
Intelligence-led
key part.
testing.
Yeah, because you had to do the mandatory, find out the intelligence of who might be targeting you, use that to drive the techniques used in the pseudo red team engagement, essentially.
Yeah.
Good concept.
It was a great concept.
Good concept. And, at first, with the first standard, the first version of the standard, it ran into some problems because the requirements in order to say you've conducted a CORIE engagement were super strict. So you had to have people who were highly experienced in very specific areas. And I think the biggest wall that people couldn't get over was there was a minimum time frame that you had to conduct the exercise for. And unless you're a big four, prohibitively long, right? Your small to medium enterprises aren't going to spend money to test for 30, 60, 90 days.
No, they're not.
And also, it comes down to that mindset shift of 234 says I have to do pen testing, but now you're telling me I also have to do this objective-led testing. It just seemed like there was a conflict.
Yeah, true. Big conflict because, if you have a limited budget and you're thinking, what, I have to do both of these now? What's the difference? What am I going to get out of either of these? And they did release version 2 of the standard in the end, and it was a little bit less strict. It was easier to conduct. But to be honest with you, I don't really know how it went because it fell off the map, like you said.
It just disappeared.
But perhaps we need more things of that nature with what we were discussing before, right? Frameworks around how to conduct something that is more representative of the real world.
The issue again we run into is PCI DSS. PCI DSS says you need to follow, excuse me, a PCI DSS penetration testing methodology. Now, here you go and talk to most pen testers. You say, what is the methodology for PCI
don't know.
DSS testing? And they don't know.
No. And a lot of them are not even sure if they're qualified to conduct PCI DSS penetration testing, because there's a lot of myths and a lot of misunderstandings about who's allowed to conduct this, what the requirements are for a corporation to be able to actually say that we're compliant. Not just them, but the people testing need to be compliant in a certain manner too. It's very tricky.
Yeah. So sounds like we're in this bit of a changing shift to moving from, which you said for a long time, pen testing should be part of the quiver, shouldn't be the only arrow that you're firing. We're seeing from a commercial perspective, a lot of organisations moving from offensive security services to the defensive security services. It can't be one or the other.
No, it's got to be both.
You need to put in your defensive security services. An EDR, a managed EDR, and a monitor SIEM are hopefully going to stop you from being ransomware. But if you're not testing those controls, how do you know if they're working effectively?
I think something that I'm noticing very recently as well is that the general skill floor of pen testing is vastly higher than it used to be. You have a higher barrier to entry. And one of the things that comes with this is that because the defensive side of things are so good, the EDRs are so good, every company and their uncle has got a really good third-party provider, or even just the Windows built in for the Defender for Endpoint. You're always going to be bypassing
I'm sure
something.
if you talk to Richard Granger, he's going to very much disagree that every organisation has good security controls.
It's
and built-in
definitely
Defender is
more
any good.
rare these days for out of the box tools to just work though, and that's the thing. So we're finding a lot more of a advanced tool set. We've got guys in-house here at Driscoll who are building custom C2s, and that's just almost every day for us now. We've got 2 really good C2s that we can make use of at any time when the client says to us, we want something that's going to be a little bit more than just a regular, and we go, okay, well, we've got just what you need. And I bet you we're not the only house doing that.
No.
So the fact that the tooling is evolving to meet this new defensive landscape is really important. So like you say, if you're monitoring for all of these basics, but not everybody's using these basics anymore, let's test it. Let's see where those weaknesses are. Let's work together.
Look, and then we go back to the favourite term that we've talked about for years, leaving off the LAN binaries and scripts, just using the
ways of old.
inbuilt tools that are in Windows, and your EDR is not going to find this.
It's not going to find it because it is signed by Microsoft, and Microsoft says, I trust Microsoft. There's a new one that's come out recently where you can use Windows Defender Access Control, WDAC, and you can deny list the other third-party EDRs in there using their own signatures. So you take their installer, you extract their signature, you tell Windows Defender Application Control to ignore this signature, and it blocks the EDRs from running.
Of course it does.
And because this loads before any of the third-party EDRs, it takes preference. So now they're out, and you think to yourself, okay, cool. Now all I need to deal with is Defender, which is quite a bit easier than dealing with that and 1 or 2 others, you know?
I think you
Living
might
off
have
the
been-
land is the way.
I think you might have been telling me the other day about an engagement on which the tester got access to the CrowdStrike instance maybe straight away. And at the core of it, if you can get into the CrowdStrike kind
Console.
of central console, you can just kind of conduct remote code execution
I
wherever
popped
you
every
want.
box. It was me, yeah.
Immediate remote code execution across the whole network.
Yeah, I did that testing, and you're going to love it because it's your favorite. They had, it wasn't a lack of MFA, but there was a misconfigured MFA on their Okta portal. So I used 365 creds. I got into the Microsoft My Apps, and in there was the CrowdStrike, all of their network boxes, everything like that, their PAM. So I got it, their
Of course it
CyberArk.
was.
So by me abusing a misconfigured MFA, I logged in as this person and effectively popped every single box they had, along with all the other infrastructure they had, just because of misconfigured MFA.
I love
It
the
always
fact that you
comes
say
back
it's
to
going to be
MFA.
my favourite thing. And it's just
You
because you
love
know it
MFA.
gets me annoyed because it is such a simple thing.
It is.
Gents, we've been talking for a fair while already, believe it or not. And it comes to my favourite time of Jack. Wise words of wisdom that you can leave us with on offensive security services. What have you got for us?
Look, there's a lot out there that you can get now that's quite mature. Like Mike said, you can get testing by really experienced guys who can go really in depth onto really specific things. But I think the big takeaway is perhaps that's not always the best way to go. And it's probably best to look holistically across your entire environment to make sure you're capturing the quantity of everything that you might have, because IT environments are only growing rather than the quality of the security on one specific system.
Here you go. What about you?
I think for me, it's going to come down to the old security mindset from the get-go. You can't have security as an afterthought. We've been saying this for a while, but it's never going to go away. If you tack on security, that weak point is where you tacked it on. It needs to be there from the get-go, from the development, from the creation, from the idea and the seed phase. That's where you need to get the security up and running to, and you need to have backups. Make sure that you are ready. in all
Backups,
those things.
backups. Tagline of
Just be ready
Cybeers.
to go on those regards. I think that's the main takeaway for me right now.
Yeah, and I guess mine is that we've talked about purple teaming for years, but no one's ever really clearly defined it. But you need to take that combination of the red and the blue, and that is doing things like simple MFA checks on your M365 and your VPN. You don't need an offensive security services team member or someone trained to check if you have MFA everywhere, because the red team is going to find that anyway, and is going to abuse it. So you need to be leveraging your defensive side to also take that offensive mindset. And I think we're going to see the pen testers start to evolve in the future. So they're not just going, oh, I'm just on the attacking side. They're going to start taking a more defensive mindset as well, which is what we really require.
Agreed.
Very nice, agreed.
Gents, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
And cheers, everyone. Look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you very much.